Yeah. There you go.
Yeah, 20 already. Sounds.
39. Again. And that's not just silence. The parenting is on it. Leave it up like that. That's the rules. Pops over the straight line. So. We're good.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our April 25th Town Council meeting. We are going to be continuing with our budget presentations this evening. Before we begin, I just want to go through the emergency evacuation procedure. In the event of an emergency, there are 2 doors on your left, another one in the front of council chambers here. We would exit the building, cross Middle Road, and wait further instruction at the school administration building. If we could all now stand for a pledge of allegiance and a moment of silence for our men and women serving in harm's way. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic. Thank you all. Okay, before we begin, I just want to go over a little bit of housekeeping. We are streaming with Zoom. So anyone who is participating remotely, if you're on Zoom, there's an icon to raise your hand. If you're calling in on your phone, *6 will allow you can unmute your phone. *9 will indicate that you have a question. If you're participating remotely or in the council chambers tonight and you speak at the podium, please state your name and address for the town clerk. And with that, we will begin with our roll call.
Mr. Katzman,
Here.
Ms. Abbott, here. Mr. Gleason,
Here.
Mr. Hamilton,
Here.
Mr. Levette,
Here.
Dr. Ryan,
Here.
Mr. Aguilar.
Here. Okay. So our first item is a continuation of the budget presentation. We're going to kick it off, Mr. Rayner, with.
Yeah, so if we could do a little house
Wow,
keeping
yeah.
from last night.
Okay.
Right, if you could bring up the PDF. There we go. All right, so last night there was a motion, and it was approved to keep the tangible tax rate at 5.65 or 15.651, same as it is during the current year. And then we would come back and then tell you how that would impact the budget. Next slide, please. But prior to that, 2 quick slides. I presented this slide last night. This is the discretionary versus non-discretionary total budget. And what we did is we subtracted out the discretionary spending. And then delineated that there's a little over 2.3% of the total budget that represents discretionary spending by the town side departments compared to the entire budget. And that was down from 3.4% the previous year. If you go to the next slide, it was brought to my attention This slide is better labeled. It was labeled last night as discretionary versus non-discretionary total municipal budget less school. It really is the total budget less the school appropriation. Earlier in the budget book, there is a delineation of what the total municipal budget is. This slide represents the total budget less the school appropriation. So the budget minus the appropriation is $34,144,210. And still, obviously, the same logic applies, and that's what was meant to be shown here. Is that it's a smaller piece of pie. The wedge is bigger, but it's a much smaller pie. So that'll be corrected in the web as well. If we can go to the next slide, please. So if we keep the tangible tax at 15.651, obviously the expenditures stay the same. Or the proposed expenditures and proposed revenues stay the same. It's $71,431,755. That represents a total budget increase again of 1.92% over last year, and a $2.864 property tax rate decrease. So the property tax rate for residential and commercial would go from 15.651 to 12.787 per 1,000 in assessed value. And obviously the levy and its relation to the tax cap remain unchanged. So we're still at 3.75% to the tax cap of 4. Yeah, if you go to the next slide, please. This slide really doesn't change because property taxes, as I said last night, it's a zero-sum game. So if the tangible tax rate goes up or stays the same as it is this current year, then the proposed tax rate for commercial and residential will go down. So property taxes will still account for 86.3% of all the revenues. Next slide, please. So we would still project 97.375% as our collection rate, keeping the tangible tax rate at the 15.651 will change the residential real estate levy. So that levy will increase 5.54%. And because the net asset value of the commercial real estate went down, the gross asset value of the commercial real estate levy will decrease to 12.526% of the gross. And that cleans up last night. So that's what the effect on the tax rates are. And at that, I'll turn it over to the school and they can start presenting their expenditures.
Mr. Rayner. Dr. Kenworthy.
So Ray, that's the budget book. Do you have the presentation? Yes, that. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Rayner, and thank you to our esteemed council members for the opportunity this evening to present the school department's proposed budget for FY24. This is our school committee approved budget. So I would like to acknowledge our school committee members, many of whom are here this evening, and who take their role as stewards of our town's educational system very seriously. With us as well are several members of our district leadership team, a few of whom will be joining me in this presentation, and I know that many others are watching remotely. I want to thank everyone who contributed to this process on the school department side for their hard work and efforts. As you know, this was not an easy budget cycle to navigate. So I will move forward through each of our slides. Feel free to stop me along the way if you have any questions, or we would be happy to take questions at the end of the presentation. Next slide. So this first slide provides an overview of our budget development timeline, which for us begins each fiscal year in October and then continues throughout the fall and early winter at each of our schools through our district leaders who work collaboratively with their staff. We ask each school and department to present us with a budget that meets the needs of all of our students while allowing us to be able to make continuous improvements as a district. After many refinements with our school and district leaders, we enter the school committee review phase, which takes place over 3 public meetings. Our school committee members do their best to ensure that our budget honors the hard work of the individuals who contributed to the process, meets the goals that we have set for our students, and does so in a fiscally prudent manner. On March 20th, 2023, our school committee approved the budget request that is before you this evening. Next slide. So for us in the Portsmouth School District, everything that we do is guided by our district strategic plan. Our strategic plan was reviewed and updated this past fall, and the budget request before you this evening aligns with our priority goals of providing equitable opportunities for all students to prepare them for success in life, ensuring that all students have the social and emotional supports they need, coordinating high-quality professional development for our staff, communicating purposefully and frequently with all stakeholders, and maintaining and improving our facilities to ensure they are safe and can support 21st century teaching and learning. Next slide. This budget request before you, the budget request before you this evening also supports our district enrollment, which currently stands at about 2,200 students and is expected to increase at our elementary grades over the next few years. Next slide. So the next two slides summarize the expenditures and revenues in our FY24 budget request. You have the full details supporting these summaries in the budget book provided by Mr. Dioro. As you can see, overall expenditures are up 2.6% from FY23. We kept our employee compensation and benefits driven primarily through step increases and contractual obligations at a 2.1% increase. We did decrease a total of 4 FTEs over last year and did this through our collaborative budget process and in discussions with district leaders, capitalizing on retirements and ensuring that any cuts would not impact the quality of services offered to our students. The rate of inflation is one of the biggest drivers on the expenditure side. Our transportation contract in particular, as is the case for most districts, is directly tied to this rate. Next slide. On the revenue side, this budget request would require a 3.66% increase in the town appropriation over FY23 for a total appropriation amount of $37,287,545. This is a $1.3 million increase and is needed to support the expenditures, which are primarily, this town appropriation increase is primarily driven by a $250,000 reduction for Portsmouth and Governor McKee's proposed state aid. As you know, there has been much discussion on this topic, and I would like to take this opportunity to commend the efforts of our school committee chair, Emily Copeland, and member Emily Skean, who have spearheaded these conversations for us at the state level. Last week, our school committee hosted a workshop with local legislators on this topic. I would also like to thank Mr. Rayner and Mr. Helfand for their participation in this discussion. While we may not see the fruits of this work during this budget cycle, hopefully we have started conversations that will yield more positive outcomes for Portsmouth in future years. And please note that we have taken every feasible step at our disposal on the revenue side to help offset the town appropriation number. Next slide. While the last two slides are the main focus of our discussions this evening, there are a few other items that we include annually in this presentation to ensure that council members have all of the pertinent information related to our budget. This next slide provides a 5-year summary of the school department budget and the town appropriation needed to support that budget. Please note that I realized after submission, the FY23 numbers, I forgot to remove proposed. So those are obviously actual numbers. FY24 would be proposed. So as you can see, our overall expenditure increase for FY24 is in line with previous fiscal years. And I have discussed the factors that are driving our town appropriation request slightly higher in the past few years. Next slide. On this next slide, you can see our annual update on the district's surplus accounts. In the top section, you see a total of $973,217 in funds that are restricted through district policy in accordance with best financial practice. As you may be aware, These practices were recently reviewed and commended by Moody's in the determination of the town's latest bond rating. Any remaining surplus money for the district is set aside specifically for capital improvements. And we project that with the completion of several projects by the end of this fiscal year, the district will have about $566,000 remaining for these capital improvements. And these are, as you know, outside of the current bond projects that we are working on. Okay, next slide. So these next two slides will provide an overview of all available district funds, which include federal sources that all districts receive annually, typically referred to as title funds, as well as temporary assistance provided to school districts during the pandemic, which we refer to as ESSER funds, and which will be expiring over the next few years. Please note that these funds are not part of our operating budget, but we include this information annually for full disclosure on all funds that the district manages. So at this time, I'm going to turn these slides over to Mr. Chris Dioro, our Director of Finance, who will walk us through these slides.
So while the school unrestricted general operating fund is the vast majority of our budget, we do receive several material federal and one state grant on an annual basis. You can see them here on the chart. We've been disclosing these grants in our annual budget request and obtaining school committee and town council approval for what we call our all funds budget. These are the grants that we reasonably expect to receive each and every year. Please note, no awards have actually been made for these grants yet for FY24. So the amounts I've listed are approximate and they're subject to change when we actually get our grant award notifications. These grants are all highly restricted and the funds cannot be used to supplant or cover regular operating expenditures. The district expects to be awarded approximately $1,983,000 under these federal and state grants in FY24. Next slide, please. The district is still receiving funding under the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriation Act, or what we refer to as ESSER 2, and the American Rescue Plan Act, which provided ESSER 3 funds and also additional IDEA funds. The district received a total allocation of a little over $3 million. There's approximately slightly less than 1.2 million of these funds remaining to be used. And as you can see, some of the funds expire in September 23. The majority expire in September of 24. We will continue to utilize these funds to support our students over the next 2 years. These grants are multi-year, one-time grants in response to the COVID pandemic and are not expected to reoccur. Therefore, we're not showing them on the all funds budget, but have them here separately for you to see. What's that?
Thank you, Chris. So next, while we were reviewing those funds, we wanted to take the opportunity for Dr. Liz Viveros, our Deputy Superintendent, to provide a brief overview of exactly what our ESSER funding was used for, our remaining plans. And she will also provide a few highlights on the over $800,000 in additional grant money that she oversees and which help to offset our operating budget. Liz?
Thank you. Good evening. So this first slide here is an overview of how we've utilized our ESSER 2 funds. The focus of these funds were to support students needing academic interventions and accelerate our students through enrichment opportunities. The funds supported before and after school interventions in enrichment, supplies and materials to support those interventions, along with summer enrichment and intervention opportunities. We are on track to expend all of these funds as they expire in September of 2023. Next slide, please. This slide here is an overview of our ESSER 3 priority areas. This year, we purchased a high-quality ELA curriculum, provided professional development for staff and teachers, and we were able to hire various interventionists throughout the district. For the upcoming school year, we will be extending 4 of the interventionist positions, and they will be supporting students for that upcoming year. These funds expire in September of 2024. Also, throughout next school year, we're looking to update the HVAC unit in our high school library. Thanks. And this final slide I'm going to be reviewing is just some highlights on grants that our district has been awarded and 2 pending grants that we're still awaiting a final decision on, totaling just under $900,000. And it's just important to note on this slide that the $500,000 from the Department of Defense grant is actually over 5 years. So it's about $100,000 each year. Thank you.
And thank you, Liz. So I also wanted to take this opportunity to provide you with some of our district highlights from the current school year. We are very grateful to the town of Portsmouth for the collaborative relationship we have and for the generous financial support that we receive. In turn, we hope that you are proud of what we are able to produce for the students of Portsmouth through that collaboration and support. While I won't read through this entire list, I did want to highlight the last 2 bullets, which I believe demonstrate the fruits of this collaborative relationship. While there are many ebbs and flows at each of our schools when we look at comparative test data each year, and a lot of hard work that goes into trying to improve those outcomes, when you look at our finished product, generally seen as SAT results at the high school level, PHS consistently ranks in the top 5 among all Rhode Island high schools, with a little bit of ebb and flow in that top 5 each year. And similarly, according to niche.com, a site used and promoted heavily by realtors, Portsmouth is consistently a top 5 school district in the state and the highest rated in the Aquidneck Island and Sakana area. I think that we are able to produce excellent outcomes for our students, and I hope that you agree. So lastly, while we do not have a capital request as we are working through the construction phases of our facilities bond projects, we did want to take this opportunity to formally request the use of $90,000 remaining in impact fees that had been set aside for the school department, and to request the consideration of a capital project funding mechanism that we have observed being used by many other communities. So at this time, I'm going to ask Mr. David Houle, our town and school department Aramark Facilities Director, to speak as to what we would like to do with those remaining impact fees. And then Mr. Diora will return to wrap things up for us with this final request.
Good evening. As you can see in the pictures, the curbing and parking lot at the middle school has long passed its life. And it's become a safety issue. And we're asking that you, as the doctor just stated, to release some funds so that we can correct some of these. It is a real safety issue for the parking lot goes across the evacuation route in case there's ever an emergency, and the curbing's totally destroyed. DPW director last week said they can't even sweep it anymore. It's so bad. So we'd like your consideration on that. Thank you.
Next slide, please. So lastly, in addition to the impact fees request, we're also asking the town to establish what's called a school capital improvement revolving fund and to deposit all future housing aid reimbursements from non-bonded cash paid projects into this fund for future school capital projects. This is best practice. It's done in Providence, Lincoln, Central Falls, I think all past ordinances in the last year or two. Doing this would allow us to compound the effect of housing aid reimbursements. For example, we are currently in the process of using $200,000 of school capital funds to complete a RIDE housing aid approved emergency safety security project. The town will ultimately receive a minimum of 35% reimbursement or $70,000. That $70,000 is deposited into the CIP revolving fund, and we then use that $70,000 on future approved projects the town would get an additional $24,500 in housing aid. If we use that amount in the future, we get an additional 8.6 in housing aid. I think you see where I'm going with that. At some point, we're starting to receive housing aid on projects that we're paying for with housing aid, so it starts to compound itself. Again, this request is only for projects paid for by cash. It's completely understood that bonded projects, that housing aid offsets the principal and interest payments, so this would be cash paid projects only. And in my opinion, now actually is the perfect time to create this type of capital fund. Historically, the town has budgeted housing aid reimbursements on cash projects as general fund revenue. And as such, that's fluctuated from year to year. I went back and looked back in 2017, housing aid on cash funded projects was over $300,000. Currently, there are no projects paid for with cash that are providing housing aid in FY22. So there's no budget adjustment that would need to be made and no budget hole that would need to be filled. Thank you for considering this request.
I believe that concludes our presentation. So thank you again for consideration of our budget requests. We'd be happy to take any questions. If there are any.
Mr. President, I have a couple of questions. As always, at this time of year, we ask it, and this is probably for Mr. Diorio, but what are we looking at in terms of anticipated surplus for this year? Last year was about $110,000 roughly.
And so our next financial report that's going to the school committee at the beginning of May, I'm projecting a small surplus of about $250,000. I expect that we will miss the top line, but offset it by expenditure savings.
Next question is for Mr. Woodhead and David. Is it possible to piggyback the paving at the middle school with our paving projects we're doing this year to get some economies of scale and potentially get a little bit more done with $90,000? That we're not paying mobilization fees twice.
Absolutely. If the school wants to piggyback our contract with PJ Keating, we're more than happy to include that in there. We just need to know the square yardage of the area for that. We have no problem with that.
Great, thank you.
Actually, Brian, would they do the curb repairs and sidewalk repairs if needed? Or are they just, I mean, they have that ability. I just don't know if it's.
They don't, in their contract, it's just paving, it's reclamation, milling, and then paving. If curbing, we could probably get prices from our on-call contractor to see what the price for the concrete curbing to go around the school is, but we could do that too. We can also use our on-call contractor. if they want to.
Thank you. Further questions, comments at this time?
Yeah, a couple. One, thank you, Mr. Superintendent. I do appreciate all the effort that all of you have made. So I was looking through the budget and I had some concerns, and I wonder if I could ask Ms. Viveris to come back up.
Sure.
Thank you. By the way, I was one of the people, Superintendent, that helped the SAT scores when I was there. Len actually was one of the downside guys. Okay. But it seems to me that you are addressing a lot of the concerns I have with those students who may have more troubles in our district. You were mentioning any number of things that actually seem like they may be running out. Grant programs that came from the federal government or somewhere.
Yes, so our ESSER 2 grant funding is expiring in September. So the past 2 years, we were able to provide those before and after school interventions and enrichment opportunities for students. And we will be unable currently to provide those opportunities. We are, however, going to provide our third summer of enrichment and intervention. So we were able to squeeze in 3 summers with that. But yes, they are expiring. So we're going to have to start to think creatively of how to further support those students before and after school.
And let me ask you, is there a place in the budget that I can see funds? Because some of those I saw were purchase services is there a place in the budget that shows where the town is making a commitment to those issues? That is somewhere in the budget that we're coming up with money.
Right, so those slides that I had reviewed were specific to those ESSER grant funds. In the budget that we're currently proposing, we haven't incorporated before and after school programming for that.
And I also noticed, I don't know if this is your bailiwick, there was a reduction in the summer school program. Is that in your care?
So we provide summer school programming for our high school students called Credit Recovery. So we will continue to be providing that. That's outside of the grant. But the additional summer intervention programs that we've been able to provide for the past 2 summers and for this upcoming summer currently are not a part of our budget. So I'll be looking for other grants to try to support that.
That's a real shame, isn't it?
It's disappointing.
The, that's an editorial comment. I mean, I was actually somebody who used to make phone calls in class and get kicked out. I was somebody who actually never had any problems, really legitimately, a very secure environment. But I was aware of many young people that didn't have that. And I'm imagining that the tests and the challenges are much greater now. So it is a little disconcerting that we are not able to, and I know people think Portsmouth, oh, well, I was the truancy judge coming into Portsmouth. And while Portsmouth in the high school, and while Portsmouth had a great number of services for those children, you could still see that there could be more for children that were at risk. The other question I have, and I don't believe this is for you, there used to be, I saw the purchase seal services, nursing coming into the school. Now, do we still have the role? This is my first budget in a long time. Do we still have the role of the nurse teacher?
Yes, yes, at all of our schools. We
At
have
all of
nurse
the
teachers,
schools.
yeah. Yes,
So
we
the
do.
nursing line item is for coverage?
Exactly it.
So that would fluctuate from year to year. Anytime that you see nursing represented as a purchase service in our budget, that's for students who require a one-to-one nurse.
Okay.
And
And that's
that
not
number fluctuates
reimbursed
every
from
year.
any sort of
No, and then-
state?
Reimbursement, Medicaid reimbursement, perhaps,
Okay.
yeah. Probably not dollar for dollar, I'm sure. But yeah, that is separate from each of our schools has a separate school nurse teacher.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cameron.
Thank you.
Any further questions at this point?
All right, thank you.
Mr. President, for the good of the order, is there
A motion to provisionally approve the town appropriation to the school department at $37,287,545.
second?
All those in favor?
Mr. Capson?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott? Aye. Mr. Gleason?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Levesque?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0.
And a motion to provisionally approve the total school budget bottom line at $45,295,044.
Second.
All those in favor?
Mr. Capson?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott? Aye. Mr. Gleason?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Levesque?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. Okay.
Mr. President,
Yes.
I'm assuming we're not able to address the concern that was expressed over the expenditure of capital funds at the middle school at this meeting.
No, that's something that they can look into to see if the money is.
The piggybacking would be different, but the authorization to do the revolving fund, I assume would be us.
I thought you were talking about the impact.
But that would be an ordinance that we would have to write, that we would have to have hearings for. It's not something we can just decide tonight to create this revolving.
That was my assumption.
Sure, yeah, and I'm happy to come back for a future meeting. I figured that would be where we would have to go.
We'll invite you.
And the $90,000 comes out of impact fees. That would have to be a separate item on a different agenda as well. It wouldn't be.
Oh, I agree with that. I
wouldn't be a budget.
understand that, but I mean, I think this is the time to start addressing those type of things that may in fact impact the final budget. And one of them would be the request to do the capital, which might not have any real impact. But I also think that the request with regard to dealing with the problem, whether we do any sort of more creative way of dealing with it, we need to deal with it. And I actually was thinking, because of the administrator's comments, that the cost of the paving substances going up. I was going to ask the administrator before we got to a final budget to somehow advise us how much less bang for our buck are we getting in road repair, so that we can in fact try to address that, because I think many people think that's a very important thing to have.
And it was, trying to remember, because I don't have the brief in front of me, but that was the last slide that I showed last night. So going from $950,000 this year to $1 million next year, and then the original plan was stay at $1 million. Over 5 years, it drops by, the road safety rating, I think, drops by about 0.5%. So we still stay in a satisfactory category. So my advice last night was, let's monitor this and see if the price of asphalt comes down. So we're still in the good category, but we will see a slight 0.X% decrease in our road safety rating.
Unless you're the one that trips over the little hole in the road.
There's
And I'm
probably
too
people that
old
hope I
to
do.
tripping over little holes in the road. Thank you very much, Mr. Administrator.
Okay, with respect, we'll sit down with the school administration. Very interesting concept. So let's talk about that. Additionally, since we gave the schools the balance of the impact fees, that was early in their budgeting process. That balance has actually increased quite a bit. So I'm sure that there's well more than enough in there to cover the cost of the concrete curbing as well, which I know will not be cheap. So we'll bring that to the council at a future date. If we could just stay on a school budget for a moment. I know that we've been criticized in the past for not discussing these separately. So you did approve the town appropriation for $37,287,545. And just to be clear, that total that you provisionally approved of $45,295,044 did include the federal aid, which was projected to be $270,000, state aid, which was projected to be $3,496,499, a restricted revenue, which is projected to be $1,983,000, and miscellaneous revenue, which is on the next page, of $2,258,000. So the appropriation plus those figures do add up to the restricted and unrestricted budget for the school that you provisionally approved of $45,295,044.
Thank you,
If
Mr.
I don't
Rayner.
say that, I'm going to read about it tomorrow.
Thank you.
And just to answer Mr. Levesque's question, the road surface rating goes from 72.24 to 72.01 over the course of that 5 years.
Which is still in good condition. Anytime you're above 70, you're in.
We're in satisfactory range, but the only thing we can hope for is the cost of oil goes down, which would impact the cost of.
It's the labor though. The labor's gone up.
Yeah, that too.
So it's one goes down, the other goes up, but I think that's just the nature of the world we're in right now. So we'll continue to move on.
Okay, so
Since are we moving on from the school budget?
correct.
I'd just like to thank the school committee. They put a lot of work into this. We're about to put a lot of work into our own budget. And I just want to acknowledge, thank you.
And if I could add, I realize there were an awful lot of tough choices. And for a community like this, It is really sad that those tough choices have to be made. But thank you.
Okay, so if we can turn to page 9 in the budget book, which is up on the screen. So this goes back to the executive summary. So in the bottom section of that, you see the expenditures. The overall expenditures are proposed to be $71,431,755, which is a 1.92% increase year over year in expenditures. So tonight, time willing, we'll be able to discuss public safety and public works. And as we've done in years past, if there's time, you can go even further. I think that's the way we structured the agenda. So for the police budget, if we can turn to page 48.
Yeah, we'll just give it a minute. If the people from the school department wanna, you're more than welcome to hang out.
Brad, something up there. Oh, you got it. Okay.
They're at the house. Well, we could get the police department in, we can get the fire department in. I think I got a button here. Chief, is it true? Is it true? Did the troops come running?
Let's not test it tonight.
This just showed up on the desk here, so I'll just save it.
Let's not panic tonight.
No panic. Calm as can be.
So page 48, you can see this is where the police budget begins. So with regard to salaries and benefits, in accordance with the current contract, if you remember, 3 sergeant positions were added last year, which were pulled from the patrol officer end strength. There's an accreditation sergeant, detective sergeant, and then there's 6 shift sergeants. Additionally, 2 captain positions were created and non-pensionable stipends were added to the budget as salary adjustments so that we can create pay differentials between the different ranks. And that's all in a collective bargaining agreement. The payroll for the deputy position seems skewed high, but that's due to the retirement of the previous deputy. The former deputy will expend his accrued vacation and benefits into the next fiscal year. The same applies to the detective line. One of the detectives will retire and expend his accrued benefits through September of the next fiscal year. The records clerk that you see listed is that was authorized in the last budget. That was a delay hire. So it looks like that salary is skewed high, but they started well into the current fiscal year. So the apparent growth in that line accounts for a full year of salary. There is also a growth in the healthcare waivers line due to more officers electing not to take healthcare coverage. So while we will pay more for healthcare waivers, we will expend far less in healthcare premiums. And you'll see that that happens a number of times throughout the budget for various departments. So overall, total police salary and benefits expenditure will decrease by 0.63%. Operationally, if you go to the operation page, great, thank you. We are projecting slight increases in IT support, utilities, equipment, training, and maintenance costs. We are also budgeting, and we do this throughout the budget, $3.45 per gallon in fuel costs, and that's a contract that we currently have. So we will see a 4% increase in that line. Overall, we are projecting a 13.36% decrease in operational expenses and a 1.65% decrease in total expenditures for the police department. And we respectfully request provisional approval of $7,184,194 for the police budget.
I do have one question. I've been looking for the overtime account. And I haven't been successful in finding it yet.
There's
If
7 of them.
If you look in the top portion where salary and benefits are laid out,
OT, temp, general, staffing, COVID, doesn't exist anymore, training, court, criminal investigation. Page 48.
So on page 48, towards the bottom, you'll see a bunch of lines that are listed OT, OT, OT.
The Andrea, I had found it before. There was always a principle that at a certain point of overtime expenditure, which I don't think we're at, but that it implies that you should be considering a new hire. Are we anywhere near that type of overtime requirement?
I don't think so. I'll turn it over to the chief. Like I say, we work on this budget from August to the present time. And we just added personnel with regard to the rank differential. So you have captains. We added a sergeant. We moved the accreditation sergeant over. We have the harbor master who splits his time between the sea and land. So I think we have it covered. But I'm sure the chief would love to have more people. Let's hear what he had to say.
That was gonna be my first thing. I'd love to have more people. The overtime, you'll see, well, this year will be a little bit higher. At some points during this fiscal year, we actually were down 6 officers. So our overtime right now is higher and exceeding where I'd like it to be. But that should be leveled out, or that should be offset by the salary and benefits that we're not paying out to cover that. So you will see this year that our overtime is going to be higher than it should be. Right now, it's projecting over budget, but that is due to the 6 officers that we are down and filling those positions for the minimum staffing.
So we have
the other question. If I might.
Yeah.
Most of the time in the evening, do we still have a north end, south end and a rover?
Yes, sir. Yep.
Okay,
3 officers on the road is the minimum still.
and do you, just a question, that is the same as when I was on the council a long time ago. Have you encountered any real problems with that at this juncture?
We'd love to see it. I mean, ideally, we'd like to increase our minimum manning to 4. We know that we're trying to look for grants in the future to do the COPS grant. I know there's some hiatus and some issues where we weren't able to apply for the COPS grant because we recently got the COPS grant and we had the 2 SRO officers. So we had to wait. So hopefully in the future that we can increase and do the COPS grant. So there's a lot of different things. I love to add traffic officers and have officers dedicated to traffic. I know there's an issue with that, but I'd love to have 4 officers. But I think looking down the future, I think that's something in our strategic plan for the 5-year plan that we'd be looking for, increasing the size of the department to meet the needs of the community.
One last question, how long is an officer normally off the road if he makes a DUI arrest?
New officers, a brand new officer might be off the road 7 hours or so doing that DUI report. It's a lot of time. But if you get an experienced officer, it's still a lot of time. It's a few hours. I mean, you have to make sure you cross your T's and dot your I's. And Portsmouth, our officers are very proactive with DUIs. I think we had 170 or so DUI arrests last year. So our officers are very proactive and out there stopping it, but it takes a lot of time.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
So also the chief was being very diplomatic. The biggest issue that we have facing us is attrition, retention and recruitment. I've discussed this with the council a number of times. It's difficult.
I think I just saw Middletown approved a program to have incentives. And I believe that's after East Providence, and I think Newport all did an incentive program.
We did. They're cropping up all over the state. We're addressing it in a different way. We think we have a better quality of life. We have a good service, and we addressed it via non-pensionable stipends.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief.
Motion to provisionally approve the police department's main budget at $7,184,194.
Seconded. All those in favor?
Mr. Capson,
Aye.
Ms. Abbott. Aye. Mr. Gleason,
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton,
Aye.
Mr. Levesque,
Aye.
Dr. Ryan,
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre.
Aye. Motion passes 7-0.
So on page 51, we have the prudent silent safety officer budget. This budget is proposed to remain relatively flat except for fuel costs and contractually mandated increases in pay and benefits. So we therefore project a 1.97% increase in the public safety, prudent silent public safety budget. And we ask for provisional approval of $119,913 for the prudent silent safety officer expenditures.
So moved. Second.
One question.
Yep.
Prudence safety officer, is he also in the police union? That's a separate
No,
function.
PMEA, clerk union.
And without getting to the PMA page, are they roughly at the same wage increase?
Well, PMEA gets 2.5. This one looks a little odd because, and Lisa can explain it. He has a set wage in accordance with our contract. And then he gets a $2,000 above that. So the way it comes out in accordance with the PMA contract, it comes out to about 1.9% increase for this house.
Okay. While I'm on that point, one of the things I did notice here, and not picking on any individuals, that that there's some fluctuation in the wage increases, but it seems like based on what the unions have seen in the 2 and the 2.5%, it would seem a fair thing to have a 2.5% increase among people in the staff, you know, just my own personal viewpoint. I think there was one person that didn't get a raise and others were higher than that. But I think I would be happy to get a 2.5% raise my working career. And I think that's fair. And I bring it up
Since
now.
we get to that person, I'm not aware of anybody that didn't get a raise. Perhaps it's skewed because I don't know. We'll see when we get there. But yes, obviously that's an opinion. I'm trying to retain the best and the brightest. And there are some people that I'm trying to give raises to bring them in line with what is prevailing throughout the state in accordance with what they do, or to recognize their job performance and their responsibilities. And again, it's just my proposal.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rayner. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Mr. Capson,
Aye.
Ms. Abbott. Aye. Mr. Gleason,
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton,
Aye.
Mr. Levesque,
Aye.
Dr. Ryan,
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre.
Aye. Motion passes 7-0.
Good. So on page 52, we have the animal control officer. Again, this officer is also in the PMEA union. Last year, we aligned the animal control officer's salary to state comparable salaries in a way that does not increase the town's pensionable obligations by adding the stipends. That's why you see a stipend there. Additionally, the animal control vehicle is getting older and requires slightly more maintenance. It's still in good shape, but it does require more maintenance. Otherwise, the animal control expenditures are projected to remain relatively flat, except for contractually mandated obligations. So we ask for provisional approval of $130,345 for this budget.
So moved.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Mr. Capson,
Aye.
Ms. Abbott. Aye. Mr. Gleason.
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton,
Aye.
Mr. Levesque,
Aye.
Dr. Ryan,
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre.
Aye. Motion passes 7-0.
So if we go to page 53, here we have the harbor master budget. The harbor master's salary and benefits are prorated to reflect the portion of the harbor master's police salary and benefits that are apportioned to this activity. So what you see here is deducted from the police budget. We're budgeting for increased fuel expenses and upgrading the police boat GPS system. So overall, we project a 7.46% decrease in total expenditures, and we ask for provisional approval of $110,383 for the harbor master budget.
So moved.
Second, a quick discussion. Chief, I know this is a tough subject, but might we be able to fix our manning issues or some of our manning issues and some of the overtime issues if we were to bring the harbor master into a civilian rank or hire a full-time harbor master outside of a regular patrol officer or sergeant?
It's obviously something that can be considered, that we can look at. I know for decades of history of the police department, as long as I've been there, it's always been a police officer. At one point, there was a mooring master that was associated with that position. Something that I think we might have to look at. I heard that harbor master might be considering leaving the position, so it might be a good time to research that a little bit further.
And there's
so-
nothing in the police contract that mandates us to use police officers for the
No,
harbor master.
there's not.
I think the problem was that if you're being accosted by the harbor master or told to do something, and he goes, "You ain't a cop, I'm leaving," that can be a problem.
But Newport doesn't use, Newport's harbor master is not a police officer. If that becomes a problem, then you get on the horn and you can call the police
Yeah.
to respond, or you can call the Coast Guard to respond.
You,
But, and
I
people are
think
still
you're
gonna do that
proposing
even if it's a police
solution-
officer.
Solution that doesn't really have a problem at this point. I mean, as long as I can remember, going back to Steve Alfonso, you always had a police officer on the.
Understood.
The discretion that a police officer has the knowledge that a police officer has. How they get away with it in Newport, well, if you're ever down there on a weekend, you might find out.
we would still need a police officer and we'd still need a police boat. We still need to get to Prudence Island.
Oh, absolutely. I don't disagree with that. I'm just saying that in our current situation here in town and across the nation in terms of recruitment of police officers, if we were able to supplement a body to give you another body or keep a body in the ranks, it might be beneficial for the overall safety of the community. That's all.
Thank you, Chief.
Tiverton as well has a civilian harbor master.
And
But I think the point is being made that you lose police officers for what, 6 months, 5 months of the year, maybe? If not 6.
I think moving forward, we heard from the chief, it's something we can look into, weigh the pros and cons.
Sure.
One of the things that we've heard in the past, though, is we also have to respond out to Prudence Island, where some of these other communities do not have that, obligation. And we've had situations on Prudence Island and Hog Island where, the police response was critical. So there's probably it's a juggling act, and it's something we can weigh, look at and see what's the best path moving forward. Okay. Yeah, we have a motion in a second. All those in favor?
Mr. Capson,
Aye.
Ms. Abbott, Mr. Gleason,
aye.
Mr. Hamilton,
Aye.
Mr. Levesque,
Aye.
Dr. Ryan,
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre.
Aye, motion passes 7-0. Going on to fire.
So if we go to page 54, you can see the beginning of the fire budget. Here we have the salaries page. And the following page is benefits. So with respect to salaries, the salaries reflect the collective bargaining agreement that was approved last year. Of note, we no longer pay longevity and there's a one-time plus up in the salary. So you'll see that the salaries jump in percentage, but that's one time. Longevity is something that says, once you earn it, you get paid it every year. So you see the longevity line is, when you get to the next page, there's no more longevity paid. Additionally, the SAFER grant expires, and so we will fold 8 firefighters into the general fund beginning next March. If you go to page 55, benefits are therefore projected to remain relatively flat with just a slight 0.06% decrease. With respect to operations on page 56, you'll notice the elimination of gas, diesel, and vehicle maintenance expenses and fuel costs. These costs are paid for from the Public Safety Capital Fund, which was established previously. We are projecting increases in ambulance billing services, building maintenance, medical supplies, and expenses in turnout gear. Of note, there is a significant increase in hydrant inspection fees of 10.27% year over year. So overall, and that's set by the Portsmouth Water and Fire District. Overall, the proposed budget is projected to increase by 2.85%, and we asked for provisional approval of $7,252,559 for the fire budget.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Mr. Capson? Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Gleason?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Levesque?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguilar?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0.
So if we turn to the next page, page 58. I'm sorry, we're gonna go to safer now, which is page 57. The 8 firefighters, obviously, as I told you, were hired under a federal funding grant. It's called the Staffing for Adequate Fire and Emergency Response Grant, SAFER. And it covered 3 years of firefighter salaries. The grant funds are in a restricted account and it is drawn down to offset the salaries and benefits associated with these employees. And that grant is due to expire next spring, next March specifically. The expenditures listed on this page have no impact on the general fund, and this information is presented for information and tracking purposes. There's no vote required. On page 58, we have emergency management. This is Ray Perry. Our part-time emergency management director has historically been compensated well below the actual number of hours worked and significantly lower than professional emergency managers on average. His current salary is based on 14 hours per week. I'm proposing that we compensate this position the same rate per hour, but we compensate him at 20 hours per week. This accounts for the bulk of the increase in the budget proposal. So I therefore ask provisional approval of $51,368 for emergency management.
So moved.
Second. All those in favor?
Excuse me, Mr. President, if I could just ask more about that position.
Sure.
That's before, well, the last time I was on this council, it wasn't that position. So I think it's the last 3 or 4 years that was been established.
It was there, but it was more of a real small part-time position. It's been before Ray, it was Jim Blair more.
John King,
John King.
and it was
Oh, yeah,
inside
John
the
King,
fire
yeah.
budget.
He was kind of like volunteer almost, wasn't he?
Almost, yes. Yeah, he got a small stipend, but the field of emergency management has absolutely exploded. The amount of training that we're required to go through is just astronomical compared to what it was just when I started. There's a whole emergency management agency that we have to report to. And Ray has picked up the ball and run with it, especially during COVID. Additionally, Ray is, we're very lucky to have him. He is a professional emergency management director. He was the one who responded, who was in charge of the Coast Guard's response to the Gulf oil disaster. And so we got a pro, but we pay him yeoman's wages. I'm just trying to get him more money. His rate stays the same, but get him up to 20 hours. I would be absolutely shocked if he doesn't answer that door. If you knock on it right now, he might not be there, but he's generally here 30 hours a week, if not more.
I was going to ask you what benefits he does to the town. So thank you for answering now. Thank you.
I think in addition to that, he's also critical with our hazard mitigation plan, which helps us with grant opportunities, post, pre and post disasters and things of that nature. So just having that plan in place and making sure that we keep it going, it goes hand in hand with Leah and the planning department. But having that person in charge like Ray is really helps us out and relieves the police and fire of some of that responsibility as well.
The hazard mitigation plan also helps reduce every homeowner's insurance by
Yep.
having it properly in place.
Yeah. So, yeah.
And he's
Thanks.
always looking for volunteers.
Anybody here have extra time?
Sure.
All those in favor?
Mr. Capson?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott? Mr. Gleason?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Levesque?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguilar?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you.
Yep. Going on to public works.
So if we go to page 59, we see the start of the Public Works budget. So on page 59, you see salaries, and in accordance with the recently approved collective bargaining agreement, DPW employees received a one-time $3,000 increase in their base pay. Additionally, they will receive a 3% increase in pay in their 5-year contract, years 1, 2, 3, and 4, I believe, and then 2.5 in year 5. On the next page. The benefits. We are projecting decreased healthcare costs and pension costs. And with regard to operations, I think that was on the same page. I apologize. And then on page 60, we begin the operations. So with the exception of utility, fuel, and contract costs, there's really no significant increases in the operations budget for DPW. So the proposed DPW budget is projected to increase slightly by 1.21%. And we respectfully ask that you provisionally approve the Public Works budget for $3,086,258.
So moved.
Second, and just two quick questions. Where are we with streetlights and conversion and giving them back to the state?
Yeah, we're at a stumbling block. It's quite expensive. We haven't been able to find the money, so we're looking for grant money that we could use to leverage to do this project. But to bring everybody up to speed for us, it's about 50% of the streetlights in Portsmouth are state-owned. For the state to take those over, we have to buy those lights, convert them to LED, and then turn them over to the state. It's going to be extremely expensive, so it's stalled, quite honestly.
Define extremely, 300, 400,000
No, we're talking millions. So
to convert the LEDs.
yeah, to buy all the lights, it's probably going to be on the order of $1.5, maybe $2 million by the time we're done with the project. So right now, we're looking.
Prism project that they called, or is it different?
Well, that Prism was one of the companies that was that had approached us.
Somebody different now, or?
There's a number of different vendors that are doing this. So it's quite frankly, the project is stalled. We can't find the money in the budget to do this. There are a number of initiatives that we are pursuing, and we hope that by this time next year, we're going to have a plan for you.
And the grounds contract is just, that the increase is just contractual. Is there
That's contractual.
anything, I guess it's for Brian and Paul, is there anything we can start doing staff wise that would help decrease that number? Or that's the Daypon's contract, correct?
To weigh in on that, this is always a double-edged sword for DPW, and I do respect where he's coming from. The fact is, we've only got 16 people working in DPW. They pretty much all got to be on call during the winter, so there's really no vacations during the winter season. So when they can take their vacations and their accrued time off and their comp time, that is really during the summer when the grass is growing. So we do rely on the contracts. I mean, they do what they can, but there are days when we only have 4 people on duty.
And like Mr. Reyna said too, we have 2 guys out mowing right of ways all week already, just mowing right of ways, Founder's Brook and right away to Shoreline. And then we have 2 guys mowing curbside too. Then we have basin cleaning, street sweeping going. So we really don't have any personnel to be taking on any deep responsibilities.
And when is their contract up?
The school department just went out to bid, so it's going to be a new renewal this year.
Thank you.
Mr. President,
Yes.
Mr. Administrator, so I'm curious, this was new to me, so if we purchase these lights and install them, then we can turn the lights over to the state,
Correct.
and is there any out year
About
savings?
50 of them. Yes, there would be out year savings in electrical costs. Our electrical, the price to keep those lights on would obviously go down. It's the initial investment that we're trying to get over the hump with.
Okay, and I'm gonna ask the Mr. Hamilton question. Do you have a ballpark on how much we are spending to keep those lights on? In other words, how soon will we be able to recoup the expenses?
We're spending.
Yeah,
We're spending.
$185,000.
$185,000 we're paying.
So roughly 50 or 60% of that is state.
Yeah.
You're about 90.
So it would take about 10
$100,000.
years, well. Yeah, at least 10 years. All right, thank you. Thanks, Administrator.
Like I say, the initiative's not dead. It's, if you remember, we were going, pedal to the metal with this project, trying to get it done. It stalled COVID 2 years. Everybody, squirrel, look somewhere else. We're back, but it's just one of those things. We were hoping that we would have a plan this year. But with 8% inflation for most of the year, it's astronomical. So obviously, there are a number of things in the pipeline that you're going to have to discuss in the future, which could potentially mean more revenue for the town. And if we can leverage the money that we can afford into a grant as a grant match, we'll pursue that. That's all I got right now for you.
What is
Sorry.
any idea what the working life of one of these LED lights are? Are they 10 years? Are they 20 years? Are they?
It depends on the ones that you buy. You know?
And once we turn them back to the state, we really don't care.
Right.
It's just a silly,
No.
somehow
No.
years ago, the state started charging the towns for the electricity to run the light, and it's every town, to run the electricity, to run the lights on Route 24, Route 138. All the state roads that have lights on them, the town is paying for.
I believe the town's paying for every street light in this town,
Correct.
whether
That's correct.
for the town side or so. So I assume they thought it was fair. All right, thank you, Mr. Administrator.
That is fair because they don't want to pay the cost of conversion.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting point because they may have just said, you're never gonna spend, be able to afford it, so we're off the hook on this one.
So anyways, much more to follow.
Because they can.
So as I stated, we're looking for provisional approval of the $3,086,258.
So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Mr. Capson?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott? Aye. Mr. Gleason?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Levesque?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye, motion passes 7-0.
Okay, so if we go to page 62, at the top of page 62, that section is the DPW snow removal budget. The snow reserve fund balance and unexpended snow removal fund for this year, right now, as of today, stands at $184,253. So we propose to decrease the snow removal budget by 23.03% next fiscal year. The amount proposed in this budget, in addition to the amount that is in the reserve, makes $326,926 available for snow removal and snow-related emergencies next year, which we're comfortable with. So we are asking for provisional approval of $142,673 for this budget.
So moved.
Second.
Questions?
Question.
Yep.
So you're basically saying the surplus from the lack of snow this year, you're going to carry over to.
The surplus from this year, plus there was surplus money sitting in a restricted account. So those two added together give us added to this proposed amount makes over $250,000 available for snow removal next year.
I think it was, I don't remember what year we did it. It was 2010, 11, 12, somewhere in that neighborhood. We, rather than having to juggle every single year to figure out where we were going to pull money from if we had a hard winter, and we established the snow reserve fund. So any surplus out of this budget line item goes into that refund for previous or future years if it needed.
1978 was not that long ago.
We've had worse since.
That would be declared an emergency and we'll get reimbursed.
Thanks to Ray. No, I mean,
Let it snow.
no, it's there's a little bit of a risk, but I mean, obviously we've seen some favorable winters, but I mean, obviously it can change. But I think this is a pretty good safety net for us.
It is, at some point, I think we need to revisit it and figure out if there's a cap. If we get to 200,000, 250, can we then change the policy and turn some of that money back into road paving or something like that. Which is,
There's always a risk of, so, like
Oh,
you
yeah.
said, there's a risk of, so, because then you have to, if you go down, then you have to backfill all the money. And that can be problematic.
We just level funded or not funded. We've got money there, money's there. So, okay. So we're at the 142, 673. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Mr. Capson?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott? Aye. Mr. Gleason?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
aye,
Mr. Levesque?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0.
Well, also on that page, the bottom section, that is the road improvements budget. So in accordance with the road paving program and the road safety assessment, we're proposing a $25,000 increase in this budget. This represents a 2.7% increase in this line. And we ask for provisional approval of $950,000 for the road improvement budget for next year.
So moved.
Second.
Questions? All those in favor?
Mr. Capson?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott? Aye. Mr. Gleason?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
aye,
Mr. Levesque?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0.
Okay, the next page, page 63. This is the Prudence Island Transfer Station budget. We are proposing maintaining funding for the additional person that covers the station when the current guard is unavailable due to time off and sickness. Additionally, as you remember, last year, DEM mandated 2 additional landfill tests per year to test for water quality at the site. And that's been budgeted and it remains budgeted in this current budget. So those 2 factors really account for the increase in that line. So overall, we project a 0.63% increase in this budget, and we ask for provisional approval of $128,173 for the Prudence Island Transfer Station.
So moved.
Second.
quick question, we approved the contract Monday night, but
Yeah, there was, it was a
Yesterday.
wash.
it just, the contract we approved works within the budget.
It works within this
Okay.
budget because the rental fees on the containers is offset by the transportation costs, and it became a wash.
Okay. All in favor?
Mr. Capson?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott? Aye. Mr. Gleason?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye,
Mr. Levesque? Mr. Levesque?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0.
There's nothing in the agenda that prevents us from continuing, so that's.
Rock and roll.
bang off a couple of the small ones that.
Yeah.
Well, we're all here, so let's do the town council.
Let's do the town council. All right, so let's go to page 28. So here we have the town council budget. The annual town council contribution to the Portsmouth Education Fund and the post-prom committee has been maintained. And the one-time approval for the Four Hearts Foundation that you approved last year obviously has been removed. That was a one-time allocation. So overall, the proposed budget decreases by 21.56%. And we're asking for provisional approval of $10,916 for the town council budget.
So moved.
Second,
Questions? Now's our chance. Now's our chance.
no chance.
Keep moving.
You can raise the budget as much as you want, but you can't get a raise
I know,
until the voters approve it, if you want to put that on the
No.
agenda.
we're good.
And it can't be until the next council.
Council.
You can't give yourself a raise.
Gotta love it. All in favor?
Mr. Capson?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott? Aye. Mr. Gleason?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye,
Mr. Levesque?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0.
so don't go spending your $21 a week too quickly.
We've 8 years. 8 years we haven't got this. It's all
14, my
good.
friend.
I know, it's all good.
Nope.
We are good.
It's probably what Mr. Levesque was getting paid back in the 90s.
Yeah.
All
They
good.
used to all go to the Portuguese club. Actually, if Kevin were here, he could tell you, we used to. go down there together.
or Joe's.
Not so much Joe's, they were all fancy. dressed up. Highfalutin,
All right,
you know what I'm
let's
saying?
move on. Let's do the town administrator.
All right, town administrator budget, page 29, please. So changes here are due, mainly due to pay adjustments and contractual obligations. I've also adjusted the administrative assistant's salary commensurate with her job performance and duties and responsibilities. Overtime has also been added to this year, and it will be a one-time add for work that will be required to transfer recorded town council meetings to the web. There was a service that started out as free for the town, but has steadily increased in costs and has finally reached a point where the only work done is to create links to videos that are already produced by our system right here. Overall, the budget increases by 6.59%, and we're asking for provisional approval of $341,526 for the town administrator department.
So moved.
Seconded.
Questions?
Question. The longevity payment, is that for the assistant?
Correct.
And you're saying based on her job performance, you're giving her the higher raise and what we've
Correct.
seen.
Correct. Job performance and her duties and responsibilities. Yes.
Thank you.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Mr. Capson?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Gleason?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Levesque?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. Town clerk.
So the town clerk budget, page 30 and 31. So I am proposing to adjust the salary of the town clerk. This will ensure that her compensation package is commensurate with other employees of equal responsibility. She is a department head. Additionally, it creates a separation between her and the clerks that work for her. The town clerk does not receive overtime or longevity. Additionally, in accordance with the memorandum of agreement with the PMEA union, the assistant town clerk is one of 3 PMEA positions that were promoted to a level above the current C clerk rating, and that's been phased. That we're phasing that in over 3 years. So that accounts for the salary jumps there. Operations on page 31. This operations budget reflects the movement of miscellaneous expenses and the dog licensing printing costs into the postage and miscellaneous line. It also accounts for flat or reduced expenses related to advertising and anticipated code ordinance changes. So overall, the proposed town clerk budget is projected to slightly increase by 0.073%. And we ask for provisional approval of $485,454 for the town clerk expenditures.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions? All in favor?
Mr. Capson?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Gleason?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Levesque?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0.
Okay, on the next page, page 32. Begins the canvassing budget. The canvas,
To be fair, the canvas is not in the office, not in the audience. I don't know if you see online.
so we may want to hold
Yes,
this
that
one.
one.
Yeah.
President, that's up to you. I can talk to any portion of the budget, so if you want to wait. till
Well, you have a
tomorrow.
finance director sitting to your left.
Let's go to finance then.
And planning.
Are you okay with that?
Yeah,
We
absolutely.
have HR, we have. Planning and Ray.
Okay, so let's go to finance. Finance budget starts on page 34. So
Oh,
So there she goes.
you're just.
Too late. No. No,
we'll stay on page 34.
we'll come back. We'll come back to finance.
So
I mean, canvassing.
okay, so in accordance with the memorandum of agreement with the PMEA union, the administrative clerk here listed here is the second of the 3 PMEA positions to be promoted to a level above the C clerk. Additionally, we eliminated the deputy position and replaced it with a town accountant position. The salaries are essentially the same. It's slightly less for the town accountant. Operationally, on page 35, this budget accounts for projected increases in our liability and property insurance premium, telephone charges, professional and training services. Of note, we have not traditionally budgeted for insurance deductible expenses, but you can see that there are insurance deductible expenses every year, Chief Peters. But we see expenses in this line every year, so Chief, don't hurt me. This year, we are budgeting for anticipated insurance deductible expenses. So overall, the proposed finance expenditures are projected to rise 6.59%. And we ask for provisional approval of $1,089,302 for finance expenditures.
So moved.
Second.
I think we're gonna have a question.
Hi, Tom Grieb, 110 Thayer Drive. And it's not a question, it's a request. I think this is the right spot to put it in the budget. The Portsmouth Pension Fund has assets of $60 million. The town adds 5 to 6 million to that fund each year. That's almost 10% of every taxpayer's bill going to this fund. There is also over 3,500 transactions made into or out of that fund each year. Yet despite the high value and the significant activity, the fund balance has never been audited. On that fact alone, it is reasonable to audit the fund now. I will not make Mr. Levesque go through the trauma of listening to the other concerns already stated about this fund, but there are many. An audit of the closed pension plan for the last 10 years is reasonable and can be more than supported. An accounting explanation of the pension liability increase and the $3 million yearly contribution increase is extremely appropriate. The audit would also serve as a check on the transactions made in the pension plan, such as all contributions, expenses, benefit payments, asset earnings, and other extraneous pension transactions. This audit will assure you, as the fiduciaries, that the $60 million fund balance has been correctly accounted for. At a $35,000 to $50,000 cost, it is small compared to the risk of missing additional issues that need to be corrected in this fund. Now, I know $35 to $50 million is a lot of money in this budget. I appreciate that. I believe that an audit could be considered an expense for this fund and taken out of the fund itself. If that were to happen, it's less than 0.06% of the fund. 0.06%, to assure you that the fund is being handled correctly and that the calculations that we're getting are correct. I think that's a very reasonable thing to do. It would not impact the budget as it is right now. If you wanted to do that, and there's nothing in the pension plan document that says it couldn't be. I put that forward for your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Grieb.
Just want to clarify one thing. You indicated it was going to cost $30 to $50 million to do that.
Yeah.
Nobody said.
I know.
Did I say
I
million?
didn't know what you meant. I just wanted to clear it for the record.
30 to $50,000. I'm sorry. Yes.
Yes.
Even
Thank
Tom makes a mistake. It's okay.
I think for what we're looking at, there was some back and forth between yourself and Councilor Levesque, who offered up that he would like to see, how did you put it, that?
I thought I got his assurance he would be for this. Just shut me up.
You said that you would like to be proven wrong. something to that effect, but I did ask Mr. Rayner for a budgetary price on that and
Oh, what did he, I'm sorry, you're really curious because I got this from a couple of CPA friends.
sure. Well, initially I asked for a what do we call it? The full-blown
Oh, a forensic audit?
And basically with this situation, it would cost a lot of money and we really don't need it for that purpose, I guess.
I think an independent audit would be all that you would need to see if there were things you should be concerned about. If there were, you might have to go further, but I think an independent audit, which wouldn't go through every transaction, would probably do something like a random checks, that sort of stuff. I think that's.
Three, different audits have different purposes.
Right.
Okay, a forensic audit has a different purpose than a regular audit, okay? So, if there is a reason to look at this, by the way, you said, I might have said something, I have no idea, I don't remember anything I say, why would I? Okay, but, I mean, I think we could see from the results and from the reports whether or not there's a call for it, and I kind of count the administration being capable to discern that. But again, if they come to us and say that's a good idea, or listening to you feel it is, I have no problem with it.
I mean,
Yes.
What's that?
I don't want to interrupt you.
Well, that's nice of you.
Thank you.
Your parents raised me right.
They had their questions at times.
Oh, yeah, I know.
As I understand the proposal, that would propose to pay for it out of the pension itself.
That's correct.
This would not affect the budget.
That's correct.
I'm not comfortable discussing anything, so, an audit, I mean, we're waving our hands around and saying an audit. I'm happy to consider the idea of a concrete proposal of what that would entail. Sort of how we would go to RFP for it, all of that.
I would agree.
And so, what I would suggest is, well, I appreciate you bringing it up here now. I don't think here now is the time for us to act on that because it's not affecting the budget, would be paid for out of budget per se. And I'm not prepared based on what we have in front of us to decide if it's worthwhile or even what its scope would be. So
Would you like me to put on another agenda item?
I think the first step would be to get a recommendation from the pension committee to have an audit done. And then
Thank you.
we could run it out to an RFP after that, find out what the prices are and if hopefully they're not $30 to $50 million.
Yeah,
But yeah, 30.
I apologize for that.
My guess would be you're probably in that, $40,000 range to do a good audit, but I think the first step would be to go to the pension committee and say, hey, this is something that I think would be worthwhile just to make sure everything's kosher within the pension program. Then they say, yes, bring it back to the council and we go out for RFP.
We could also see. if
And we also have to double check with the pension requirements. And I believe you're probably correct as to whether or not we can use it as a pension expense, but we need to double check that as well because that could lead to an audit problem.
Oh, no, I would absolutely agree. I wouldn't say take which is why I'm bringing it up. If that were not the case, it would have to come out of the budget someplace.
Go into the operating.
Yeah.
Figure it out. from there.
And this would give Mr. Fitzmaurice something to keep coming back and asking where it is. So
Nope.
everybody be happy.
So I think one of the other things that would be interesting to find out was when the last time this was done, if it has ever been done.
That was a good
So-
question for the pension committee.
It
I don't
hasn't
think
been
they-
done in 14 years. I
I
can
think
tell you
Chuck
that.
would know
It-
better.
it- it's never-
We just did.
I
Sorry?
checked, it's never been done.
Actual members. Right. Okay, so I think that can be deferred to the pension committee. But for tonight, we can provisionally approve the amount of $1,089,302 We had a motion.
No.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And a
Mr.
second. We had a
Levesque
motion and a
seconded
second.
By
Yeah.
Dr. Ryan.
Okay, all in favor?
Mr. Katzman,
Aye.
Ms. Abbott. Aye. Mr. Gleason.
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton,
Aye.
Mr. Levesque,
Aye.
Dr. Ryan,
Aye.
Ms. Aguirre.
Aye. Motion passes 7-0.
Backwards.
What's that?
Jackie,
We're gonna go back.
to-
Well, I was waiting for, I was waiting for Mr. Rayner to, we're gonna go to Candace.
Okay, that's fine. Let's go to page 32. All right, the proposed canvassing budget is reflective of anticipated expenditures due to the unanticipated special election due to Congressman Cicilline's resignation. Overall, there is a budget increase of 10.2%, and we asked for provisional approval of $320,000, $320,278 for the canvassing budget.
So moved.
Second.
Questions? Madam Clerk. $48,000. Are we gonna have to have every polling station open?
That's
Or has
what
that
I'm
decided yet?
trying now.
Regular election.
I submitted a proposal to the Board of Canvassers at our last meeting, April 18th.
Our
Yeah.
Board of Canvassers or?
Yeah,
the-
our Board of Canvassers. And they unanimously approved a combination. However, it has to be approved by the Board of Elections. So I've tentatively submitted it to them. I cannot get formal approval until there is actually a election that is signed and ready to go. We're kind of working under the radar now. I can't make any formal announcements or any notifications. And this budget is not just the two special elections. This includes the presidential preference primary in April. So we've never had 3 elections in a fiscal year. We have had them in calendar years. But this also does include that.
That was my other question as to why it was going up so much. For essentially one election, but a primary and
Right.
we get
But it's 3.
is there still, is there still a thought process of them moving the presidential primary? It wouldn't go into, it would still stay in this fiscal year.
Yes, it would
just
stay,
move
it would
the date.
stay in April. Right now, there is a bill that has been introduced to move it to April 2nd. That's being voted on Thursday in the House.
What does that do? Just move it to like the Super Tuesday with everybody else?
I don't know if that is Super Tuesday. It's April 2nd. It's the Tuesday after Easter. That's all that I knew on the calendar. I did ask the school if that was during their April break, because that would be very nice,
Yes.
but I'm not sure that that's going to work out either.
No, he stated that they would make that a.
Yes, it
PD
is.
day.
Well, there is legislation and it has passed that schools will be closed whenever there's a presidential preference primary. It hasn't been signed yet. It did pass both the Senate and the House.
So we gotta carry the number for now.
I'm sorry.
No, it is.
And to be honest with you, the special primary is the day after Labor Day. Okay, so that includes trying to set up during Labor Day holiday. There's a lot of complications involved in this. And if the schools were open, the police presence would have to be increased. We went through a lot of the complications. I met with all of the town and the school, and we talked about the various challenges that we're going to face.
You know, I bet Congressman Cicilline has still a pretty good war chest of campaign funds that he might be able to donate to the cities and towns because he's doing this to us. Can you reach out to him? You have a better relationship with him than I do.
Not sure he'd
Everybody does.
consider it. but-
Mr. President?
Yes.
And I appreciate your questions. They were respectful, but I always want to remind people that the Board of Canvassers are in fact the people who hold the key to this office. And that they are specifically charged with the responsibility for making sure elections go properly. And in this particular day and age, they are challenged in really too many ways than they should ever be. I personally feel that this is a very reasonable request, but even if I felt it was unreasonable, the fact is that they are separately charged by the state government to be the ones who administrate the election of us. And therefore, quite frankly, all deference should be given to them regardless. And if there's no other comment, I'd like to move passage of the budget. Of the tentative passage.
Yep.
I guess we're using,
We had a motion in a second.
290.
Yep.
We already moved. on?
Yeah. 320,278.
Just,
I told you, I'm old.
I'm just gonna make one more comment and we made it was again from last year. I'll go back to our report, study that was done. In order to cross-train clerks, we still have a clerk in the budget that should be moved to the town clerk side, but utilized within the canvassing office. 2015, 2016, when we had that report. Which is where it led to an unelected town clerk. It's part of the PMEA contract, as far as I know, to do cross-training. That would allow it.
It would have to be a memorandum of agreement. Yes.
Okay. I think in this day and age, we should be having as much flexibility as possible to allow to maintain budgets here. If there's multiple people out in the clerk's office or in the tax assessor's office where people can be moved around and people can be cross-trained in order to do that.
Let me tell you something, Mr. Hamilton. I was the first one to propose something like that back in 1990. And it is in fact the truth that tax assessor has tax collection has an extraordinarily busy time around the payment of taxes. All right, we used to actually pull in 2 or 3 people who were extremely able, extremely competent, but nonetheless, it was overtime. That same period of time might be a slow period of time for the clerk or for the finance or for the other one. The idea was to try and cross-train. Most of the department heads said, we need the people we have. In fact, you're already starving us, so don't do it. The specific category of the Board of Canvassers has to be considered an exception. Because quite frankly, back in the day, I was just saying they have the keys. But now they have become a political football, and anybody that wants to question them concerns me. And that's what I was saying.
Oh, that's fine. I don't think that, well, other than one individual a couple of years ago, I don't think we've had any issues with voting here in town. Everybody's always had access. Nobody's ever been denied voting. I don't think anybody other than a couple of elections, and Mr. Caspin was one of them, of 1 or 2 votes that, took a long time to get through, but
Which I just want to point out, while it was one election with 1 vote, and it was a handful, were conducted very well.
Yes.
And I think,
I agree.
everyone was confident in those results, even though I lost, so.
And this little, Shangri-La of Portsmouth is not immune to what's going on in the rest of the country. It simply is not.
Understood.
And so the fact that we have not had problems in the past, unfortunately, does not guarantee we will not have problems in the future.
And I'm not saying that we won't. I'm saying that we paid for, took parts of a consultant's agreement and haven't utilized it fully where we're cross-training people. We had a canvassing department that up until 8 years ago was run by a single person and not a single person, a single individual. With temp workers that has now blown to 2 full-time workers and still temporary workers. In fact, the temporary worker is the former canvasser. So I think there's room to be able to move positions around to be cross-trained to better serve the taxpayers and the citizens of Portsmouth. Same argument I made last year, same argument I'm gonna make this year. I will make it again next year if there's no changes.
I do want to point out that this issue was brought up to the Board of Canvassers earlier this year. It was part of our agenda items. They researched the study that was done, and as well as the directives from the Board of Elections and Title 17. There was a correspondence that was sent to the town council, and it was on, I cannot remember which agenda, but it was in March, stating that they had done their research. Yes, the canvassing office has been run by a single individual in the past, but the evolution of elections is increased. I cannot even tell you the differences in the job descriptions since Barbara and I arrived. I arrived in 2013. Since then, we have administered 16 elections. The idea that the canvassing office is only operational every other year during elections is so untrue. We have had special elections and multiple elections. We faced challenges, rightfully so. But elections is not the same that it used to be. It's not the same every single election that we do. They're never the same. And Barbara's or the part-time clerk was made full-time because she is much needed.
I don't disagree that she's much needed. It's
And
also much needed in other parts of the building, which is the idea behind the consulting agreement. The canvassing authorities' research is great. But it's still the responsibility of the 7 of us sitting up here to figure out a budget. And also to figure out with the agreements that we have with specific unions, where that money goes. If the canvassing authority wants to come up with the $328,278, I fully ask them to do that. But it's our job to do the budget, not the canvassing authority.
no, I respect that.
Councilman, you keep missing the point. All right, they are state chartered. The Board of Canvassers is a state recognized organization.
I'm not
Did
missing
they
that.
actually respond to you as to whether or not your personnel could be shifted around the town hall?
What they evaluated was the needs that we have, the kinds of functions that we've done, the hours that we spend doing things. They're the ones who they review us. I answer to them in everything that goes on in the office.
All right, Madam Canvas, I think this horse is well past dead. But I do want to say again, if this chart or whatever you retained didn't include a distinction for the canvassers, fine. But if you're not looking at every department.
We did look at every department. That's the
okay,
whole
and
idea
so that
behind it.
nobody else, but what did you do with canvassers? Did you contact the state and find out whether or not they had evaluated what the canvassers do? Or did you just decide that you knew what the canvassers did and had sufficient
No, I
information
didn't do
to judge
anything.
it?
It was an outside consultant that came in and said the best way to run this building was to have a floating or cross-trained people so that if,
Specifically from canvassing? going
no,
somewhere
the
else?
whole building, all the town clerk, the
So have you
everything.
looked at the finance or any place else?
Yes,
To move?
everything. The whole idea is, I'm asking that all of the clerks.
This is the first time you brought this up, though, isn't it?
No, it is not. I've brought it up
It is
every
the first
year.
time- Well, you might have brought it up last year. In what department did you question at that time?
It's the same department. It's,
Canvassing?
yes,
So you haven't contact, we just with the clerk's budget, you didn't ask the clerk about any of the.
because the
personnel
clerk
there.
the clerk's department has for the past 6 years been understaffed.
But you don't know whether the canvassing, so you had somebody come in, but you don't know, or you assume that they are overstaffed. correct?
No, I'm assuming that they're not properly utilized when there are downtimes and there can be,
But there's downtimes in the collection department too.
there absolutely is.
All right,
And
there's
those
time-
people could move
downtime-
to the clerk's office.
Yeah.
Well, the problem is that this position,
Do
because
they-
of the
those people
position,
Move to the clerk's office at the time there's downside, if there's low collection.
because of the position that the canvassing authority has taken, we don't have that cross-training. And it needs to be done.
I disagree. And that's the end of my conversation. you know.
And mine as well.
If I may, just want to add. Coincidentally, there was an article in today's Newport Daily News about the hiring of a clerk in the canvassing department in Newport.
Former mayor.
Former mayor, who took quite the pay cut, so who knows what's going on, but anyway. In that article, there was, focus of the article wasn't this issue, but it did come up in the article. In that one, the town side hired, and maybe the canvassing office should have hired. Didn't seem to be any particular contention about that issue mentioned. And then they spoke to somebody in Cranston who said, there are 39 cities and towns, 39 ways of running elections office by state law, canvassing boards are bipartisan, goes on. But the point they were making was, there's not consensus across towns. There are some communities that canvassing board, that's how they interpret state law. We can't hire, they hire. And towns that, like us, do different things. So it's permutation. My point is, the consultant's report may have assumed that law is clear. And I don't think that's a settled point. So
It might not be.
The consultant did not consult with the canvassing authority at all. They just interviewed me. I tried to explain to him exactly how we were structured, because it is different. It is not the same as Middletown. It is not the same as Tiverton. It's not the same as Newport, and it's not the same as Cranston.
But if it's all under the same state law.
It is under the state law, and it's
Middletown
also
can
under,
do it as a town
it's
clerk.
also under our charter, sir. And I can't justify it. I didn't write the charter.
Neither did I.
No, we didn't. And we operate under what we have. And we do the best that we can. And elections have evolved. It is required, it's a two-person office minimum now. Downtime is non-existent. In the past, let's see, 2020, we had 3 different elections. 2021, we had 2 additional elections. 2022, we had 2 more. And now in 2023, we're going to have another. That's 9 since 2020.
I am still, everybody's still, I don't, everybody, missing the point. I'm not saying that the workload isn't there. I'm saying that we need to figure out a way to cross-train this clerk and cross-train clerks that are in the clerk's office, so that if you're out of town and the assistant clerk is sick and the temporary clerk isn't around, somebody can go across the hall and answer the questions of somebody who has a canvassing question, rather than, oh, you'll have to come back tomorrow or come back next week. All of that should be looked at in a holistic sense, rather than just, this is the way it is and it's going to stay that way. It's for the service of the residents of the town of Portsmouth, period. That's it.
My point is not, it's the way it is, it's the way it should be. It should be separate from us. You want to come in with the town clerk? I'll talk to you about the town clerk. You want to do finance? You want to do planning? You want to do any other town department? I will talk about cross-training, because I proposed it like 35 years ago. Canvassing is sacrosanct. It's got the keys to this office.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is
The town
sacrosanct.
clerk in Middletown does the canvassing. How is it sacrosanct?
Because nobody probably has sued them over it, because I don't know.
How would they sue them over having a town clerk?
Me.
All right, I think,
Really,
Well,
Keith,
that's-
I don't think I've been disrespectful. I've been
it's-
strong, but I don't think I've been disrespectful.
And neither have I.
Me.
You're conflating completely different issues.
Okay, this has been done.
It's not.
You made your point for about 15, 20 minutes.
all right, let's,
Let's get out. I think there's a motion on the floor.
we do have a motion and a second on the budget. In a minute, I flip the page. Of $320,278. We had a motion in a second. All in favor?
Mr. Capson?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Gleason?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Levette?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye, motion passes 7-0.
Thank you very much.
Yes. I think, I don't know if we're gonna, did you want to try to do planning or?
If we should do planning since the planner is here,
Yeah.
that way she doesn't have to come back tomorrow night. And Matt's in the back too.
We had a couple of folks. It's,
Give staff a night off. Since Matt was here late last night.
Okay. All right, so if we go to planning. Page 42, please. Okay, so again, here I am also proposing that we adjust the salary of the town planner to ensure her compensation package is commensurate with other department heads that work for the town and state planners. The assistant planner salary reflects the PMEA raise and a step increase. The planning board budget, you'll notice, has been folded into the planning department budget. So the planning board budget you'll see here in a second, is zeroed out. And the planning board admin officer salary is now accounted for here. With respect to planning operations on page 43, again, as stated, the planning board budget is now accounted for in this budget, and that accounts for most of the changes that you see. Additionally, the advertising costs for all the divisions in the planning department are now consolidated under the town planner in her budget. Of note, the town zoning ordinance is going to require a complete update and revision to bring it in line with the comprehensive community plan. So we budgeted the anticipated cost for this in the professional contract service line. So overall, planning and expenditures are projected to increase by 45.90%, but obviously that's skewed because of what we put in here. And we are asking for provisional approval of $558,051 for planning expenditures.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. President, may I ask just a quick question of my planner chief?
Yeah.
Has there been accommodation made for the accessory family dwelling units legislation that passed last year? Have we done anything in response to it? Is there anything that needs to be done?
There was legislation that passed this past June. It was very ambiguous and lots of, are you laughing at me?
No, I'm laughing at ambiguous legislation coming out of the State House.
We decided amongst the 39 planners in the state most of them did not do anything with it. And now there's new legislation being proposed at the House and in the Senate right now for new changes. So we're hoping that amongst the proposed changes and with our zoning modifications, that new legislation will come out to the benefit of Portsmouth.
So there was a bloodless coup by the planners around the state, all 39 of you got together. If all of you, I assume, are familiar with the accessory family dwelling units. They are actually a wonderful way to deal with an aging parent or even a disabled child. Although the law was going to expand that to try and deal with more people who had difficulty cleaning houses. Okay. And quite frankly, I think the cities and the suburbs didn't like it because they don't like the idea of accessory family dwelling units. They never did. It was, again, one of my proposals way back when. And finally, Peter Kilmartin got it done. My bill, his name. That's how it goes. You anticipate some action being taken on this?
Most definitely.
So,
There's,
because, I mean, the other one is currently state law. Unless they repeal it, it is the law of the state, and we should be attempting to comply with it.
my assistant town
Okay.
planner and I are doing the best we can. We have gotten several questions about it. There's, again, like I said, it's very ambiguous with, you need at least 20,000 square feet of property to have one. Does it need to be connected to the house? No. Can you rent it out to anybody? Yes.
I know, they were all decisions made on the legislative level that it
Mhm.
didn't have to be connected that it didn't have to be a relative. That was a change in what was the executive. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to put you on the spot.
It's a little
Okay.
different though for Portsmouth because we're predominantly septic systems. So when you
Right.
start adding a unit, it's a bedroom. Most lots are 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom. If you all of a sudden create another bedroom, the land might not be able to take it.
No,
So-
and I-
that's, I think why it's challenging for a community like Portsmouth.
No, I know that, but we do have on record, most of the septic systems designed by the government, the state. Oftentimes they were, had a excess capacity, might not really fit in here. But the pushback has been in every community because they don't want it and they see it as a poverty issue.
Well,
And I'm not saying you did, man, not at all. I'm just saying that's some of your other 39 in your revolution did.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
we'll see what the new law says.
Yes.
Okay. So questions, please.
Okay, so, thank you. So this was a spot where I saw there was one individual that did not get a pay raise. And seems like, I don't know if there's a specific reason for the planning board administrative officer, no increase, and I would make a motion that they receive the 2.5% increase as many other employees have received. Unless you have a reason for not wanting to give this person a raise.
It's a part-time position. I don't believe he is in the PEMEA union.
He did get a small raise of about $700 or $600. I don't know what that percentage
It
is.
says he went from 27,780 to 27,780.
He went from 20.
He went from 27,102 to
27,780.
27,780. So,
Last year.
so if you look at the planning board budget on page
It's in a
46.
different budget, okay, all right, I
Yep.
stand corrected, that's fine.
I'll let you know what
It's
the percentage is.
mentioned here, so I,
So
46 last year's.
okay.
we're talking about Leon. He's
Yes.
the,
I hope you can
John.
appreciate it. I just didn't want to see everybody get a raise and one person not getting a raise. So,
yeah, we,
28%.
I appreciate you bringing that up. That would have been horrible if we'd done that, but that was never our intent.
appreciate
It-
telling me where it is.
2.5%.
Great, thank you.
So we have a motion and a second on the provisional approval of $558,051. All in favor?
Mr. Capson,
Aye.
Ms. Abbott,
Aye.
Mr. Gleason,
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton,
Aye.
Mr. Levet,
Aye.
Dr. Ryan,
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre.
Aye. Motion passes 7-0.
I want to thank everybody for seeing the importance in updating the zoning ordinance. It's very important. Thank you.
Well, building official falls under the planning department as well.
There's a few more we could
I've
do.
got nowhere else to go.
What's that?
I've got nowhere else to go.
Um,
You know, your wife watches you, don't you?
I'll hear about that.
There she is.
So if we go to the building official, page 44. You can see that these salaries are determined by the PMEA collective bargaining agreement. So there's no real changes there other than what's in contract. Page 45 is his operation budget. The advertising costs, as I stated, and the zoning board secretary are now consolidated in the town planner budget. Of note, due to continued growth in building permits and inspections, we do project an increase in the fees paid for contracted inspection services, mechanical, electrical, plumbing. So overall, expenditures are projected to decrease by 1.44%. And we are asking for provisional approval of $392,657 for the building official budget.
So moved.
Second.
Questions? All in favor?
Mr. Capson,
Aye.
Ms. Abbott,
Aye.
Mr. Gleason,
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton,
Aye.
Mr. Levet,
Aye.
Dr. Ryan.
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre.
Aye. Motion passes 7-0.
If you go to, obviously, the next page is the planning board, you can see that it's been zeroed out because all those expenses have now been carried into the planning budget, planning department budget. If we go to page 47, here we have the economic development budget. Salary, in the salary and operations, this budget projects a slight raise for the Director of Business Development in line with the negotiated PMEA raises. Overall, we project a slight increase in expenditures, and we do ask for provisional approval of $49,993 for economic development.
So moved. Second.
Questions? All in favor?
Mr. Capson?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Gleason?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Levesque?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0.
Yep, yes, Matt is still here, so if you want to do tax.
Do it.
Yep. Yes, if we go to page 40. As I've done for a few other employees, I am proposing adjusting the salary of the tax official. And again, this is for the purpose of keeping his compensation package commensurate with other employees of equal responsibility and recognition of his job performance. The salaries and benefits sections also reflect the transfer of one clerk to the police department. So that position opened up. It was approved last year. That person bid on the job, went to the police department. Her backfill obviously comes in at the beginning rate. So you'll see a difference in pay there in the negative. And additionally, one of the employees has elected not to partake in the healthcare plan, which is in the past, which accounts for the decrease in the increase, I'm sorry, in the healthcare waiver line. So with respect to his operations, our next full revaluation will be conducted in 2025-26. This is an expensive endeavor, and we are proposing the establishment of a restricted fund to be added to each year as a measure to even out the burden to the general fund when that bill comes due. So in addition to that, you'll see a line for software costs that reflects accounting for the increase in the GIS costs, the software cost that is used in the tax office. That addition to the other software licenses raises that line by $5,200 than what would have been normal. So overall, the tax division budget is projected to increase by 16.84%. And we are asking for provisional approval of $563,743 for tax expenditures.
Before we do that, we need to correct the healthcare waivers. Either you've zeroed it out, so you took the $5,000 out of the budget. So is that person, you said it backwards, either way. All right, so we've zeroed it out. You said you added it in. It's been zeroed out, so the number is right. Okay,
I'm sorry about that.
move to approve. The provisionally, excuse me.
Second.
Mr. President, may I add?
Yeah.
I'm actually pleased to see this, but I noted that there was no budget for any tax sale.
I don't know that we budget for that, but I'll let Matt speak to that.
Tax sale is no cost to us. Any fees or expenses incurred, the people that buy it at tax sale pay for all that. So like the attorney, the title exam, the letters, the notifications, all those get assigned to the.
Okay, well, back in 21, and it looks like in 22, it was a line item in the budget. Did this a change in policy? You decided just to?
Yeah, yes, that was an accounting decision.
Oh, makes sense. Can I ask you, I have not seen any recently. Have we had a tax sale recently? How long ago?
Tuesday in June, every year. We've had it past, since I've been here.
Okay.
Um,
Any idea how many properties are currently on the
um,
list?
right now, we're approximately in the twenties. It usually comes down to like 5 to 8 day of the sale.
Hey, how about that gas station? No. You know what? It's been grossly devalued.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Mr. Capson?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott? Mr. Gleason?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Levesque?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Motion passes 7-0.
Okay. We have Lisa here, if you'd like to do HR.
Then call it a night.
Do it.
Ray has to come back tomorrow night anyways.
Yeah. That's it.
My dog is great self-control.
So, human resources on page 36. Okay, so for salaries, obviously I'm proposing the 2.5% salary increases in line with what was proposed for PMEA. I'm also proposing that we continue our participation in the internship program that's run by Northeastern Cooperative Education. This program develops municipal experience and leadership through a curriculum that's run by the Northeastern Cooperative Education Program. With respect to operations on page 37, advertising and online recruiting costs are increased, and that's reflective of the increased efforts that are required to recruit employees in this labor market. We're also budgeting for significantly increased workers' comp insurance costs. The workers' comp insurance premium and the costs associated with people going on workers' comp have increased significantly. So overall, we project a 3.83% increase in HR expenditures, and we ask for provisional approval of $2,298,337 for this budget.
So moved.
Second.
With a question. I ask this every year, but are we sure we're comfortable with $50,000 for retirement contingencies? We blew it out of the water this year by doubling it.
Hence the reason why we lowered it. Yes.
Everybody retired this year instead of next year?
They did, and we did take one of the long-term police officers and we paid them in this budget as opposed to going into next year. It actually benefited because we paid at the current salary as opposed to the new salary is of 7-1. We don't have anybody that's given their notice, 1-year notice at this point in time. We do have a couple of people who are eligible, but they haven't given their notice. So just based on that, we lowered it to $50,000.
So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Mr. Capson?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott? Mr. Gleason?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Levesque?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. That will,
Motion to adjourn till tomorrow night and finish this all off.
Second.
all those in favor?
Mr. Capson?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott? Mr. Gleason?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Levesque?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. We will see everyone tomorrow night to continue with our budget discussion.